Jeremy here, and at Holley Performance we've got a great new product for you. It's the iNTECH cold air intake, and today we brought in the 2013 Mustang to show you just how easy it is to install. Before we get started though, it's always a good idea to pull all the components of the system out, lay them out on the table so we can see exactly what we have. Then we need to take the instructions and thoroughly read them before we proceed. Before you perform any work to your car, it's always a good idea to disconnect the negative battery terminal from the battery. Next, we can remove the strut tower brace by removing the 4 nuts that retain it to the towers. And remove the cross brace assembly. Now you can remove the engine cover. Simply pull firmly upwards and lift it off. Next, we need to remove the crankcase ventilation tube, as well as the sound tube. The crankcase tube can be removed by hand, but the sound tube requires a pair of pliers to remove the spring clamp. Our next step is to loosen the 2 hose clamps that hold the intake tube to the throttle body and the factory airbox. An 8mm socket or nut driver will do the job. And then remove the intake tube by wiggling it out. Before we pull the airbox, we need to disconnect the mass airflow sensor from the wiring harness. Simply squeeze the connector and pull to remove. You'll also need to separate the wiring harness retainer from the airbox. A flat blade screwdriver works well for this. Using the 10mm socket, remove the bolt that secures the airbox to the inner fender well. Once the bolt's loose, you can lift and remove the airbox assembly from the engine bay. Take note, if the grommets come out with your airbox, you'll need to remove them and reinstall them in the fender well holes. You'll also need to remove this grommet from the factory airbox. We'll reuse it later on the iNTECH airbox. The next step is to remove the mass airflow sensor from the factory airbox and install it in the intake tube of your new cold air system. A Phillips screwdriver is all that's needed to remove and reinstall it. Now we can install the sensor into our new intake tube and secure it with the 2 screws provided in the kit. Next, we need to install the crankcase ventilation fitting into the intake tube. No sealant is needed, just hand tight, and then turn it an additional quarter turn with a 22mm wrench. Now we can take the grommet that we removed earlier and install it in our new airbox along with the sleeve. Once that's done, position the airbox and press it firmly down into the factory mounting location. Now reinstall the bolt and tighten. Install the silicone coupling onto the throttle body using one of the supplied clamps. Once it's in position, we can go ahead and tighten. Now take the dry filter element and press it firmly onto the intake tube and position it over the opening in the airbox. Once it's lined up, press firmly down into the airbox until it's fully seated. Finish making the air intake connection to the throttle body using the supplied silicone coupling by working your fingers around it until it's fully seated, and secure the connection with the other hose clamp. Next, reconnect the mass airflow sensor to the wiring harness connection. Now we can reinstall the crankcase ventilation tube onto the nipple that we installed earlier. Before we reconnect our sound tube though, you'll need to remove this forward retaining grommet and discard it. You also need to remove the one on the rear and relocate it to the forward position. We can slip it over the tab that's built into the airbox. Now we can finish our connection at the air intake tube. To finish up the installation, we'll reinstall our engine cover and reattach our cross brace. And don't forget to reconnect your negative battery terminal. And that completes the installation of our iNTECH cold air system on the 2013 Mustang. I told you it was going to be easy. For more information on iNTECH's cold air intake systems, visit our website at holley.com.